Steve is on Bruce's right, but in the next shot, he is on Bruce's left. In this scene, Thor has a short beard. But a few moments later on the ship, he has a long beard. At the beginning of the movie, Clint's daughter shoots an arrow that hits the middle. There is no arrow in the next shot. In the other shot, we see the arrow again. In the next scene, the arrow disappears. From now on, we see the arrow. In the 1970s sequence, we see a truck. It's interesting to know that the tires have been released since 1982. The time stone is in front of the Ancient One face. In the next shot, we see it above her head. Avenger cut the Akihiko's throat with a sword and blood flowed. But when the Akihiko fell to the ground, his throat was not bloody. After Akihiko dies, he moves and breathes. When Scarlet meets Thanos, her necklace is in the middle of her chest. But in the next shot, the necklace is moved to the left. Bruce gave Scott 2 tacos, but Scott only got one. When the Avengers go through the time tunnel to 2012, we see a car with a lot of building bricks and rubbish on it, but the car has no damage. In the scene where Tony comes to Steve by car, and with him talking, the shadows get shorter and longer. Part of the scenario is happening in Norway, but evidence shows that the scenes were filmed in the UK. The coast you see is in Scotland, not Norway. Another, the license plate is from the United Kingdom. And this one, the phone number on the pizza box is British. On the Thanos' right hand, there is the armor. In the next shot, when the Thanos is trying to glove, there is no armor on his right hand. Ancient One has kept the time stone with 2 fingers. In the next shots, the angle between the fingers changes. There are several mistakes in the breakfast sequence. Scene of kids taking pictures with Bruce. In the first shot, there is no phone in the Scott hand. But in the next shot, we see a phone in his hand. The next mistake is about the bread on the table. In the first shot, we see the bread halved. Next shot, the bread is complete. Thanos wants to insert the axe into Thor's chest. A few moments later, one of the Avengers takes the axe out of his hand. We see that Thanos has his permanent weapon. War Machine is on the right and Captain Marvel is on the back of Thanos. The next moment, both are in front. In the sequence inside the elevator, Jasper Sitwell uses a Samsung J6 phone. This sequence is narrated in 2012. But you should know that this phone was launched in 2015. Thor and Thanos are fighting. The gauntlet is between them. The next moment the gauntlet is out of reach range. Barton points his sword at the Red Skull. But in the next shot, his sword turns 90 degrees to his right. Steve put the case on the floor. A few seconds later, the suitcase is relatively far from the two fighters. In the next shot, the suitcase is in close proximity to the two fighters. When Steve and Steve 2012 fall to the ground, we see a lot of tiny glasses around them. The amount of these tinies increases and decreases in different shots. When Scarlet Witch landing in front of the Thanos, Black Panther is behind her. But instead of supporting Scarlet Witch, she disappears in the next shot. Thanos stabs an Avenger with a sword and Avenger hits a ball. But in the next shot, the ball disappears. Tony's right hand rests on his robe. In the next shot, we see the same hand on the edge of the table. In the third shot, the hand rests on his robe. Tony holds the hat from its behind. But in the next shot, he holds the hat next to the hat. On Bruce's left, Tony is seen. A moment later, to his left is Steve. Old Steve is looking at the lake. In the next shot, his gaze suddenly turns to the man. The officer is seen in the middle of the crowd. In the next shot, the same man disappears suddenly. The first shot shows a cop on the bench. Next shot, the cop disappears. In the third shot, the cop is under the bench.